Okay, hello everyone and welcome to our latest webinar, Creativity for Filmmakers. This is a bit of a change from what we've normally been doing. We normally do product-based, but this is a bit different and we've had a great response, so thanks for joining us. My name is Rob Newton, I work at Visual Impact and I'm your host for this session. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Simeon Quarrie, storyteller, director and Canon ambassador. And it's the second one we've done. So how's this one so far, Simeon?
I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you for joining us. Those of you who are already logged on, I know what it's like at the beginning of these webinars. It takes a couple of minutes for people to come on and join. So that's really good. I know we've got the question box there, and hopefully we can utilize that a little bit more today.
Definitely, yes. We've got 3 different questions that we're going to insert during the actual webinar, so that should be good. Simeon will go through his experience in a little while, so I won't double up on that. But as I said, before we get started, some housekeeping. There's a question box which we've already alluded to, and it'd be nice to get it nice and interactive and to utilize that question box. Ask as many questions as you like as we go along. We'll answer them as many as we can. If not, we will be recording the webinar and you'll be able to check it out later on, and we will answer all of your questions after the webinar, if not during it. So that's something to to really do, and we're really keen to get as many, as I say, questions as we can. As I said, we've already mentioned that we're going to do an audience poll. We've got 3 different questions for you. It's nothing difficult. It's not like taking your A levels, so don't worry about it. It's just, again, to get a view so that Simeon can mold his presentation to the profile of the audience rather than trying to second guess as to how much creativity you use on a day-to-day basis and how much this is a new experience for you. So I think that's it. I'll hand over to Simeon. I'll be asking questions as well because I'm really interested in this topic as well. So I think we're all looking forward to a really interesting 45 minutes. Over to you, Simeon.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So howdy people, my name is Simeon. I'm like many of you, I'm a cinematographer, photographer. We use all sorts of phrases, whether it be director of photography, for example, and it's been a really interesting journey coming and getting to this point. Firstly, just thank you very much to our sponsors as well for today. Canon have helped me get here, which is fantastic. So really appreciate that. I am a Canon shooter, but to be honest, it's just for me about getting the job done. So whatever gets the job done. Sure. Brand is not very important, but it's just, they've been supportive to me over a number of years, just as I kind of use their projects. Their products. Now I know we've got a couple of audience polls. Can we get one out there? Is that all right?
Yeah, sure.
That'd be good. Let's go for on the subject of, let's go for the I am. All right. I just want to get a bit of an idea as to who is out there and what everyone is. Okay, good. That's going right. So the question is, how often do you shoot personal projects? Okay, so we're getting a cool poll in there, so thank you to those of you getting involved, seeing those numbers coming up. I think this is one of the key things that is really important when it comes to staying creative, is kind of shooting for yourself. One of the things that often happens is when we shoot, it seems to be that the more that we end up kind of shooting for clients, and the bigger the clients are, the instructions you get from those brands are often very, very detailed. They're telling you what fonts to use. They're telling you what depth of field you should use. Sure. Heck, I saw a kind of a briefing document that says there's no lens flares allowed. I mean, it just goes on. And I think often for those of us to shoot, we want to be creative, but we also want to get paid. And sometimes the two don't always go together. And I think that's one of the things that I found challenging. I mean, my background, just to kind of go back, I'll give you an idea of my background. Look at that poll there. Okay, so we've got a number that do once a month, which is awesome. I wish I could. More than once a month, every quarter. I think I'm probably in the every quarter. We've got 27% people shoot for themselves every quarter, and 45% every year, and then 14 is never. Awesome. We've got to change that today. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm here not as someone who has nailed it and who is always creative, but someone who is always trying to push myself as an individual and also as a team. So my aim this year is to shoot more personal projects, and the aim is that the creativity that you develop, it keeps you alive, but then it also informs your clients as to what you can do. Now,
do you also feel that the more creative you are, the more jobs you get, and the more creative jobs you get, because people can see your work and then say, well, actually, Simeon's really good at this area, so therefore you're more likely to get different types of jobs that come in?
100%. Yeah, definitely. I think that is key, because with business, people don't buy something unless they can see it.
Yeah.
The problem is sometimes you're stuck in this routine of creating work that doesn't feed the soul. And then when that happens, you haven't really got anything to show. You're not showing people what you can do. You're showing people what you've been told to do. And I think that's something that is sometimes, that's the two different things. And the ideal is that they both come together. The problem is when you shoot the same thing over and over again, you lose passion. Now, the reason that we got involved in cinematography or filmmaking is because most of us, we are passionate people.
Yeah.
So if we end up doing the same thing over and over again, we get bored. So how many of you get bored with what you're doing? So I can see some, thank you, Phil, for getting involved. I would love to know, if you get bored, can you go to your question box? And if you get bored, can you type the number 1? And if you are always kind of interested in what you're doing, type the number 2. And we're going to do that. Okay, awesome. We're getting those coming in now. Right, now look at that.
Interesting.
Okay, so we've got a few of you who are feeling always kind of in that vibe. That's it, absolutely. Thank you, Emma, Stefan, Matt, Thomas, Glenn, Felix, Vince, Roger, Simon. Okay, loads of people. It's still going down. Right, so I've been in a situation, my background was in weddings. And when I was shooting weddings, I used to get bored. This is a scenario. You wake up in the morning, you arrive at the bride's house. Then after you arrive at the bride's house, you do bride preparations. You shoot those shots. You run to the ceremony. You get shots of the environment and maybe the church or the Hindu temple. And then you shoot the ceremony of the bride coming down the aisle. You run to the reception. You shoot the reception. You do the couple shoot. The next day, you're in a bride's room. You shoot bride preparations. Then you shoot the ceremony. Then you shoot the reception. The next weekend. Do you get the point?
And they all blend into one, I guess.
They all blend into one, but it doesn't feed the soul. All of a sudden, you start to lose that passion because it becomes repetitive. And that's why I say, as we've got that screen on up there, it's scary when you lose creativity, because the moment you lose creativity, you've got no freaking place to go, because the reason you're involved in the industry is because of creativity.
Yeah.
So that is always the really important for me thing to me, is facing that challenge of remaining creative. And that's the thing that we have to do.
I guess as well, apart from your own creativity, products being introduced all the time help with that creativity. I guess you can do things now that you couldn't do 5-10 years ago.
100%. And in fact, Vince made a comment here. He says each wedding is completely different with different problems. And actually, that was one of the key things that changed the level of creativity that we were producing. So, as Vince said, you get those different difficulties and then those different problems, but you have to use a term called gamification. I wish I had a slide for that word, but I forgot to put it up there. Gamification. How can you turn what you do, now whether it be weddings, whether it be like now I do more corporate commercial work, how can you turn what you do into a game? So for me, we ended up really pushing what we did from a creative point of view. And really challenging myself. And it could be that we look at the tools we use. It could be that we try and realize that every single client that we get, every single one of them is different. So if we can try and make sure that the product that we produce, reflects the client, it means that the work that we produce also ends up being different. So that's a key thing. As Roger says there on the questions, I'm using it like a chat. So please, people, use that question box to type your thoughts. He said, yeah, always enthusiastic, but often frustrated, and that can be very much the challenge that we come across. So I think one thing that we want to kind of really get to grips with is we see up there the challenges that we face, but then also maybe some of the creative exercises that we can do to boost our level of creativity. Now, sometimes it comes by changing what you use. So, for example, I was always looking at the challenges that I was facing and how I was getting bored. And one of the things that I was struggling with was this, maybe equipment, it was lighting, and doing the same old thing. In fact, I was doing the same execution. So this was photography, right? So with this image here, this was actually one of the first times I used high-powered flash, right? So I was terrified of flash technology. Now, for every one of us, we all have something that we feel makes us scared, and we have to take a risk. As Emma says there, Emma mentions that sometimes it's about taking risks and doing something new, and that is scary, absolutely. With this scenario, even though it's photography, the principle still applies. It was about embracing that fear that I had that was flash technology. It terrified me.
Yeah.
So then I embraced it, and as a result, my work ended up improving dramatically because I embraced that fear. This was another one where I started to blend my understanding of light and filmmaking with photography, and I embraced flash technology. So it's about doing that. It could be that you thank you, Raphael. Appreciate your kind comments on the images we're showing here. It could be that you set yourself a number of constraints. Now, this is something that is massively important, right? And I would love the audience here to take this point as really important. Embrace constraints. Now, often when we shoot with clients, there are a number of constraints that we naturally get given. It could be that it's price. Often the major constraint is you want to do a video and you're thinking, damn, I want helicopters flying overhead, and I want to have all of this equipment, and I want to shoot on this camera, etc., etc. But you have to embrace the constraints that you have. Sometimes that can feed your creativity. But other times when you are shooting and you have options, what if you was to limit yourself and decide, actually, I am only going to work with this or work with that. In fact, I'm going to throw this out to everyone on the webinar. Give me some ideas of things that would create limitations and constraints that could feed creativity. Let me know, please, now. Okay, loving it. Okay, only shoot with a long lens. Very good. Okay, space. Loving that. Time. Oh, that's a wicked one. So you might decide that you are going to only give yourself a very, very short period of time to shoot something. It means that the speed that you make decisions would speed up. It would increase.
Yeah.
It could be that you give yourself more time than you would normally have. I'll give you an example. If you work in weddings, maybe with a couple shoot, you are used to really having a very, very short period of time when you shoot a couple shoot. Yeah, they're posed, directed shots. But what if you was to put yourself in an environment where you gave yourself 3 hours? What would that do to your creativity? Actually, your heart would start to beat because you think, I know what to do for image 1, I know what to do for image 2, but then after that you start to get stuck. And then as a result, the creativity comes in because you're having to think in a different way than you would normally have to think. What else have we got here? So Stefan mentioned time. Gavin mentioned lighting. Absolutely. Could it be that you have been working with LEDs? What would happen if you changed to a Fresnel, or an Arri? What would happen if you used light gels and you started to play with color and light? So that could be cool to do. Tim Newton, he says budget. Now, how can we do that with budget? Well, it might be that you artificially shrink the budget that you have, or it could be that you invest your own funds to create more budget to work with from a point of view of creativity. Oh, I love this one. Okay, so I've got I think it's pronounced Cesare, mentions that we could not use lighting. This was a really good example, okay, of a situation I was in. So I was starting to do this really cool, creative, edgy lighting, like the images you saw. Right? I'll give you an example. Okay, so this was me playing around with lighting, yeah, playing with colors of light, playing with location, and also space, as someone mentioned on there as well. Edward mentioned space, so I changed the space I was working in. But then I decided to flip it. And I decided, as Cesare mentioned, to not use lighting. That image should hopefully be coming up. Yes, there we go. So then I went to natural light. Now, what would happen if you decided to do that for the video? Okay, the client stays on your back the whole time. Just reading through some of these. Got weather. Shoot in different weather, 100%. It could be that you would normally, Stefan, stay indoors when it's raining. What would happen if you went outside to shoot when it was raining? Yeah. All of a sudden you start to look at reflections and puddles and water drips and rain droplets on the windows. It would maybe change the way that you would shoot. Gary goes the other extreme of lighting. Yeah, absolutely. You could go to the extreme of making sure that there's no natural light. Everything is, artificial. Imagination, 100%. Working on that brainstorming process. Stefan mentioned changing the size of the crew. So maybe you're used to working with a big crew and then you shrink down to a small crew.
Sure. I guess as well, you're mentioning about working within the constraints. Sometimes if you don't have any constraints, then you can lose track of what you're trying to do, and you spend too long and too much budget, and a bit like some filmmakers who make a movie that's 3 hours long, not mentioning any names, but there's one out right at the moment with an 8 in it, and if they'd maybe edited that down, it would be a better movie or a better
Yes.
photo. If you do have someone say, now steady on, let's just...
I 100% agree with that. And I mean, how many of you out there, when you get a blank canvas, are excited by it, or does the blank canvas cause issues for you?
Yes.
And actually, that's why I think this subject of constraints ends up being something that's so important, is because when you have a blank canvas, sometimes the blank canvas is not always the best thing for creativity. So I artificially set myself constraints. For example, I decided with my team for a number of, I did 2 years where I told the team, you're not allowed to use any zoom lenses. Someone mentioned earlier working with a long lens. So we did that, a similar thing. We decided we are not going to use any zooms. We're going to work with primes only. It changed the way that everyone saw the frame. It changed and helped people to understand the different focal lengths. It created a level of discipline, which meant that we inherently became more productive and more creative as a result. I'm just going to read through some of these cool comments and questions that we've got up here. We don't know how interactive an audience is going to be. Okay, yeah, absolutely. So making sure an audience reacts quickly, I agree with that. Could be changing the nature of the way you edit. Yeah, there's a really interesting point from Roger. His passion is lighting, but often not given the opportunity to exercise those skills. So the key thing is going out there and making it happen.
Yeah.
Take some time out. We did that poll earlier where we can see that. So there are a number that's, let's say, look, we're looking at well over half of people in the audience that we've got online don't shoot for themselves, shoot for their souls, for their passion more than once a year. 44% say maybe once a year and 16 say never. And many of us fall into that category where we are shooting for clients, but we're not feeding the soul creatively.
Yeah.
And it becomes, it doesn't become as exciting. So what we have to do, Roger, is we have to get out there and we have to prize time out to make time so that we can do this for ourselves. I'm just looking at this. A good point, Rob. I'm loving that. I'm loving the conversation happening between everyone here. So thank you very much, everybody. Cine Primes from Canon. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I love playing with Canon Cine Primes. It's a different discipline.
Yeah.
Again, we talk about playing around with different technology. Do you know one thing I did? I'll give you an example. I'm going to just go back to the screen here and see if I can find a slide with a situation that a way that we ended up creating a really good, cool vibe. So I took Canon's Legria Mini. Now the Legria Mini is a very, very small camera with a very wide angle lens. So Canon said, Simeon, you have got an opportunity to come down to London Fashion Week and you can bring your entire team, Team Vivida. I was like, yes, fantastic. We had the Legria Minis and the Legria Mini X, and they were very, very wide angle lenses. It was meant to be a session, a time where the team were rewarded and they had a chance to just chill out and to do something different, to do something cool. And we got it because we were Canon CPS members, which is like a professional services from Canon. So they give these kind of opportunities for people to have fun and to get creative. So we were invited to that. So, okay, here's the cameras here. So we got some Legria Minis in and Legria Mini X's in. And then I said to the team, we're going to have fun, but we're going to use these mini cameras and we're going to document the story of traveling to London Fashion Week. And we're only going to use the Legria Mini wide angle lenses. So we made that into an exercise. Canon turned around to me and said, hey, Simeon, this is meant to be just fun. Just come and chill out. No, we're going to turn this into an exercise. So I'm going to show you a few frames that we got, right? So we had this shot was when I first switched on the camera and we realized how wide the freaking lens was. Then as part of the journey, we decided to put the camera inside a bag. So we were documenting this video that was showing us packing and getting ready to go out. So after we put it inside the bag, we then clipped it to the ceiling and documented us leaving. I then put it inside the car. Yeah, watched that shot. Sorry, ladies, for taking such an extreme view, and gents as well. And then after that, we then clipped it to the dashboard. Yeah? And we're using one focal length. So imagine it's equivalent to, say, a 15mm lens, for example, and it's just a small camera. We were telling the entire story using this one focal length. No zoom, we were not manually adjusting the camera, and we told this entire story of what it was like to be present and shoot at London Fashion Week. Yeah, thanks for the comments there, people kind of joining in and laughing with that. Yeah, we had a great time. Now, can you imagine what happens when you start to do that type of exercise yourself? You take scenarios where you may be chilling and you decide, I'm going to shoot something. I did that. We went to Tanzania for a project, and I decided in my day off I was going to take a C100. I was going to go walking around the city. And I documented stuff. I went out into the sea and I documented stuff. I shot for myself. It gave me a chance to experiment. Just as a side note, it was thanks to this video that we created with the Legria Mini that was one of the reasons I ended up becoming a Canon ambassador, right? Because this video was seen. It was an opportunity where Canon said, put the cameras down, just enjoy. Why are you getting your team to create something as a project? But because I put myself out there and we made it happen, it turned into me becoming an ambassador, and eventually also turned into a business as well. And we shot some work for the Legria Mini as a result. And I think that's one of the key things.
Yeah, I guess it's like any part of any muscle or any brain. If you don't exercise that part of your brain in terms of being creative, then it sort of withers and dies, doesn't it? And you need to take every opportunity to be creative so that you can keep that part of your brain going and be more and more creative, and that makes you even more creative as you go along.
100%. Definitely. That's why I think shooting personal projects is important. And then on the screen now, just that slide is just a few things that people have already mentioned. Can you change your edit? Can you change your lighting? Can you change your location or space? Can you change the lenses that you use? Another thing that I think is really important is that you change something. Yes. Right. So can you see everyone on screen? Right. That sentence there says change spurs creativity. Right. Now, what changes can we create within our day-to-day practice that can result in being more creative? Could you let me know your thoughts now? Just a simple thing that can be changed that can spur creativity. Love your thoughts here. Okay, get out of bed earlier. Love it. Quit the routine. Okay, I'm coming back to that, guy. That's a cool point. Absolutely. Go for walks. I'm loving. And these are some tips I'm actually taking myself. So Emma says, go for a walk. Just go out and do it. Absolutely. Edward, I'm going to add the word flipping in there. Go out and flip and do it. Get the kids to bed earlier, says Felix. I want to try and work in different locations, different technology. Absolutely. Get out there and always carry a camera with you, 100%. Like for me, you can see a little mini, I've got a G7X, just a very small point and shoot camera that I carry with me all the time, just so that if I feel creative, I can get a shot and do something. Work with new people. Amen, Tim. That's a wicked comment. Can we leave some of these comments up here? Because I'm going to refer back to this. Talk to other people and collaborate. Okay, let's break some of these points down that we've got here on screen. We have quit the routine. I'm liking that. So that Guy's comment comes based on, I guess, a little bit on what we've been saying, is that we get into this rut and we always things are always the same. And as a result, the point you made about the brain having these pathways, sometimes the brain having the same pathway is a negative thing, because it means then if everything stays the same, you do not see the world differently. And a number of the comments that are coming up here is talking about changing the location. So we can, if we change the location, if we go out for drives, I have a regular drive to the office, okay, and vary my route. Absolutely, that's what Raphael says. So I'll give you an idea of how I do this. I go out to Covent Garden, for example, and I take time out, and it feels bad, because I feel like there's always something to do. There's always invoicing I should be getting on with. There's always something for SEO. There's always something that we need to do that's part of our normal practice, but we have to break it and not feel guilty about it. So sometimes I go to a cafe and I sit down in Covent Garden and I people watch. How many of you like to people watch? Just watch people. And sometimes when you watch people, you start to think, oh, I'm loving that outfit. Maybe I could use that to inspire a project. Or look at that individual and the character and the way they move, which could then start to work with your direction. It could be that as the light changes throughout the day, as you're sitting there in that scene, that it sparks something for you. But when I'm sitting there, what I'm doing is I'm doing a few things. I'm sketching. So I may be sketching ideas and drafting them and putting these ideas down on paper. I'm not using an iPad, even though I'm tempted by the iPad Pro with the pen. I'm doing that. So here's an example on screen of a sketch that I did. Right. This is in one of my little creative sessions. Work out when you are most creative. Sometimes your ideas come when you're in the car and you're driving. For me, when I'm on the train. And when I then sketch that image, if you look at the image that's on screen now, make it your active window, you can then, I'll show you the image that resulted from this particular sketch. Okay, so that sketch turned into this image. And you see that? So that sketch that I showed you turned into that image. And this is a wedding couple. So this is me gamifying a wedding and trying to make a wedding shoot into something that's different. The story is based on the fact that these two were in the medical profession and they were lovesick. So I set a theme. Right? Created a theme, created a subject matter, created a story, and then that created a sketch. Thank you, Vince, for your kind words there. That created a sketch that then turned into this image. They were lovesick, so in love that their hearts were palpitating, that they felt dizzy, and as a result, they needed to get themselves checked out. We are just having fun, and the client is having fun with me. It's a personal project mixed with a paid project, serving that purpose. Now, just going back to a couple of other points that people have mentioned, which are really good tips. Any that stand out to you there?
Yeah, I think the one where it says from Roger, my showcase consists mainly of stuff that's done for clients. Perhaps I should include stuff that I've done for myself, within the showreel. to show the creativity that he's got.
Absolutely. I think that's a good point. I think that's where this eventually leads to. And I think following on from that, what Simon mentions here is to talk to other people and to collaborate. And someone else also mentioned the key thing of collaborating. That is massively important, because you then will hopefully create things for yourself, as Roger mentioned, that are of a standard.
I think as well, what you're doing with the sketchpad is what painters used to do hundreds of years ago. They used to have a sketchpad and they used to sketch loads of, just parts of the final portrait or landscape, and then eventually you'll be able to see the sketchbooks and then see that in reality when they've spent months painting it.
Yes.
So I guess it's a modern version of that, isn't it, I guess?
It is, and the sketches I'm doing here are very basic, aren't they? Yeah, that sketch on the screen is, I think it's actually brilliant. It's quite simple, but I'm sitting in Covent Garden and I'm doing a number of these over and over again. So that point that Simon mentions on collaborating, massively important. Who could you team up with that might mean that you come up with something that is different? So the shot I showed you earlier, everyone, where is it now? I'm going to just find this shot here. Right. Can you see the car in the background? Should be loading up. 3, 2, 1. There's a car in the background and there's props like a bike. That was a collaboration. I hooked up with a prop and a gentleman who hired and rented cars for films. It was a collaboration. He didn't charge me or charge me very little. He had an idea of what he wanted. I had an idea of what I wanted, and we worked together. And as a result, we sparked off one another. And we talk about the spark of creativity, right? Yeah. Sparks come from friction. So that's the nature of it. When two things rub together, it creates friction, and that friction creates a spark. We're often looking for a creative spark. So often, doing as Simon mentioned, and someone else also mentioned it, make sure you team up with other people. This is one of the reasons I do not work by myself anymore. So I've grown the team so that the team doesn't just include myself. In the picture that you see on screen now, you see me sitting down in the couch directing. I've got Toby, who's a member of the team who's come from weddings and grown through. Emily, who's standing up behind the girl on the couch. She has just joined the process she gets involved in the creative process and also communicating the creativity that we have to a client, so how we present it in terms of documentation and storyboard. She does that. We've got Cornell, who's on the camera. Sometimes I need to let go of the camera and I have to make sure that I am really thinking about what's happening in front of the camera. So that can be a really cool change. And then I've got Henry down there moving the screen. So that can be something that is very, very useful to put yourself in an environment where you spark off other individuals.
And is it good to have individuals which are different from yourself? I'm just thinking of it in the music environment, which obviously is very creative.
Yes.
People are creating music. You get a band that's really creative, and when they go and do individual projects, they're not as good, perhaps because they haven't got another member of that band saying, why don't we make it a bit edgy? Why don't we take the drums off there? Why don't we do this? So, and again, I guess that's very creative industry, isn't it, music? So.
Yeah, I think there are similarities, and there's good and bad to collaborating with people. I think that's part of the process. You have to be careful who you collaborate with. There are members of our team who I collaborate with on a technical side, and there are those who I collaborate with on a creative side. Yeah, and I know who not to collaborate with. And so there is, with all these things, with all these practices, there is balance. And I think that is something that's always key. Someone else mentions here changing the equipment that you use. I agree with that. Sometimes you rent visual impact. You have a rental department. I've rented from you on a number of times. Yeah. So sometimes I think, I would really like to work with this, or I would really like to work with that. I call you up and I rent the item in, and I use it. It changes my work and the field, or I get used to something, and then I may go back to using what I regularly have. Sure. That can be really important. Adding equipment to your list as well. choosing your equipment wisely, with creativity in mind, with flexibility in mind. So for me, that's one of the reasons why my kind of recent purchase and acquisition that just literally came is the new C300 Mark II, which I'm absolutely loving. And I've chosen that because it's an all-rounder as a camera for me. So it provides me with the flexibility I need to work in low light scenarios. It provides me with the ability to work in a very staged environment where I'm working with very controlled lighting. I can use it on a shoulder, I can use it on a movie. There's just so much that you can do to kind of keep yourself in the creative vibe. I'm going to take a moment now just to read a couple of these comments, if I may.
No, sure.
What's Tim got there?
Work with someone new, Tim Newton, yeah. Also.
That's a good point. So Tim says it's good to work with regular clients, develop trust over time, so you can develop the approach together. Amen to that, 100%. Tim mentioned something that's really key. So sometimes we work with clients, we're talking about clients who may not have the creative streak. This has happened with me with Barclays. So with Barclays, I've started off, and last year we were kind of doing what we were expected to do, because I just needed to build trust that we as a small agency could deliver the work that they would expect. But now they've got that. 2016 is about doing something differently and doing things our way. So I agree with what Tim's saying there. They feel like they trust us now, and in fact, right at this moment today, the team have put together a storyboard that was presented to them. They loved the storyboard. It was more creative than what they would normally be used to, and the conversation they go on right after this is a telephone conference talking about executing that project, because we've had the trust.
Perfect, yeah.
And then we've merged it with our creativity, which is also partly based on things that we've already done in our own time.
Yeah.
And we brought that forward. So that was a really key point. Vince, let's look at your comment. When videoing a wedding event, I tried to get the still photographer to let me use some of his stills. Okay, yeah, absolutely. Working out what things can you include in your productions. So it could be even stock. You're thinking, yeah, I can't shoot that particular shot of a hurricane. So then you think, right, actually, maybe we don't have to shoot everything. There's an awesome production company I'm a really big fan of called Variable. And I loved they did a short film called Anomaly, which is on Vimeo. 100% recommend you take a look at it. And they use elements of stock or rights managed footage inside the video, and it looks absolutely fantastic. They've treated it. It's just really good to feed yourself with different options. There's a question here from Phil. Do you have a team member that is actively chasing business? We're working on it. So just digressing very slightly, just to answer Phil's question, Emily is going to be involved in doing that. I was going to employ someone at the beginning of this year, but we decided that we didn't have what we needed to get, if a salesperson brought leads to the business, we didn't yet have what we needed to spend time presenting the idea to the client.
Sure.
So what Emily's job is to do is, her idea is to take the concept that we've got and developed and communicate it to a client so that we can increase our conversion rate. Then I'm going to bring someone else into sales afterwards. So yeah, that's what I aim to do there. This is a good example just of another constraint. We did a food project where we worked with macro lenses. So we took the 100mm macro from Canon, and we did a food project with a C300 Mark II, and we zoomed in, and the whole shoot was done on macro lenses.
Right.
Then we worked with the edit, and we reversed the video. Yeah, so that the edit was really edgy. It was something that was totally different. So we played with this concept of changing the lens, restricting ourselves, and then also changing the the way we edited it. I'm going to throw something else up on screen. All right. I would love to see if anyone does this. Look at your screen now. Look at your screen now. And I can tell if you're looking at your screens. Our stats are showing that, yes, everyone's going back to their screens. Awesome. Okay, does anyone do that? Let me know. If you do that, press 1. And if you don't, press 2. Do you change the music that you listen to? Oh, loving it. One,
Mm.
one, 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 one.
Oh,
We've
okay.
got a two. Felix, do it. Try it. So what I do, yeah, I'm with Raphael. I use Spotify, and I purposely changed the genre of music that I listen to. Sometimes I'm listening to country music. Am I into country western music? Truthfully, the answer is no. Everyone in here is smiling. The answer is no, but it's really interesting what happens when you start doing some everyday work and you're listening to country music. The ideas that you visualize in your mind changes. So if you're in the car, someone mentioned earlier, it might be Raphael mentioned, she changes the route that she travels to work on a regular basis. If the music you're listening into in the car change from classical music to country and western, things happen. So maybe the tone that you imagine for video is different because you see things more in that dusty tonality or harsh sunlight, hard light, because you're listening to that music, right? I went through a stage of listening to dubstep, right? It wasn't my natural choice, but then I grew to love it. If you go look through my portfolio, I guarantee you look at the car video that we shot, that was heavily influenced by the fact that I was listening to dubstep. So the image that you have on screen now is of a car project that we shot with the Lamborghini and Ferrari. That is edited to dubstep, and the whole edit, the glitch effect, is because I was listening to that.
Yeah. Sure.
So I make sure that we regularly change the music that we listen to because, as someone mentioned earlier, the key is to kick yourself out of routine and the routine thought processes that you have. So that's a tip that's really worked for me. I'm looking down some of these new comments. I'm loving how much you are all using this question box to communicate
Yes,
with
keep
me.
them coming.
Thank you. Jessica, sometimes checking out gigs of music. Yeah, 100%. Going to a gig. Now, I've not done that. Jessica, I'm going to take that idea, not just to listen, but maybe to get out there and go to a gig that I wouldn't normally listen to. That's a really good point. Um, Vince is saying, I don't really believe in doing a with new equipment not used to. Okay, that's a really good point. So Vince, in your comment, the gist of it there is you are always careful about using new equipment that you've not had any experience with. So you use the opportunity to be creative when you're not being paid. I understand that. Um, Okay, there's a recommendation from Raphael. Love the music by Deacon Blue. I'm loving that. I'm going to check that out. Thank you very much. There's a question up here from Stefan. Let's just read that question out here. Are you often faced with internal comms teams with their own storyboard and ideas, and you're brought in once the creative and logistical decisions have already been made? For me, no. We're not working on major campaigns whereby we have a separate creative director come to us and say, this is what you need to execute. I'm trying to straddle that line at the moment where I'd love to do those big things. And at the moment, I'm coming from weddings now. We get some awesome corporate commercial clients, and the campaigns we're doing are ones where we are in full control. The next level would probably be where someone says, this is our vision, do it, execute it. It's your job to do as you are told.
Yes.
Now, we're not currently in that situation. We have creative license to do that, and I love exercising that muscle. However, the key thing is that you have to exercise your creativity now in your own time with the jobs that you do when you're in a position to do so. The reason being, as a client who wants to hire you, the big clients especially, they want to know that you have the ability to execute the vision that they have. To do that, often there needs to be an amount of variation. You need to create trust that you can work with lighting. Then you need to create trust that you can actually make something. So this was a key thing. When I was looking at the world of commercial photography and cinematography, someone who's doing the hiring is looking for someone who has the ability to make something happen, not someone who just has to react to the environment.
Follow instructions.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also, if it's cloudy, can you make it look sunny? Do you know how to do that? And if it's low key, can you make it look like it's a bright, high key environment? Or do you have the decision making skills to understand what things need to be changed in order to make that happen? So that sometimes can be something that's really, really important.
Yeah, just going back to the equipment for a second. I know that I'm speaking to quite a few DPs that years ago, when you couldn't get replay and they're all using film, the director would say, "Did you get the shot to the camera person?" And they would say yes, and all that trust would be in the camera person. Now, because of instant replays and monitors everywhere, do you find that often the client keeps saying, "Well, do that again," and "I didn't like that shot," and they're getting involved in something which, if you didn't have those monitors, you'd be able to present it and say, "This is what the whole thing looks like," and they'd be happy.
Oh, yeah, that's such a hard choice. I've been in both situations. So I've been in a situation where I did a shoot, got it back, and they weren't happy. And I think, well, you should have flipping been there because you had the opportunity to be there. So you can't tell me now. So I would have preferred them to be there.
Right.
But then there are other scenarios where we've had a creative person, no, let's rephrase that, a non-creative person who's giving us creative input. And it's a real balance. The key thing comes down to trust. The point that Tim mentioned is developing trust. If you have build up a reputation with your portfolio or with the way you speak, the way that you communicate your ideas, the way that you carry yourself on set with a group of people, then the trust is there, and then they may provide you with reins or they may provide you with guidelines, but not be telling you how to do every step of your job. Which is why even in environments and situations where we didn't need to have a big team, I often would bloat the team to create something, yes, because of the idea, but also to get used to working with a team. So for example, there's a picture and screen at the moment where we created that shoot. It was my idea and concept, but I got another 10 people involved in setting up because we had to build a rain machine and we had to set up all the lighting, work with a huge venue and environment. Now for me, thank you Vince for liking that shot. For me, the key thing here was making sure that I got used to working with a team. And that was part of my own development process, because if you're used to working by yourself, then you get stuck in when you need to communicate to people, you don't know how to do it. And how do you cope when someone says, "Oh, I don't think that light is quite right. You need to make sure that you have this type of shadow across here." And sometimes you have to go, "Oh, yes, thank you very much. You're right." And other times you need to know when to say, "I have a vision. This is on vision. And what I'm saying is right."
Yeah.
That takes practice. And, being creative under those circumstances is really challenging and really tough to do. Thank you for liking the lighting there, Emma. Appreciate that, and Vince again. So that's really key to exercise those creative muscles also in environments where you are under outside pressure, because that can make things difficult. You could find that you're creative by yourself, but the moment you have a group of people involved, the creativity absolutely disappears.
Changes the dynamics, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%.
Sure. Yeah.
Can we see can we take a look at another poll? I know we had a few. I'm just so interested to see who's out there. Yes, let's go for okay, let's go for I feel creative. Let's do that. We're going to have a poll on screen. And the question is, it's not a question, it's a statement. I feel creative all of the time, 50% of the time, rarely, or other. Let us know now. And you may feel differently after this talk, we hope.
Definitely.
I love it. Okay, so we have got the majority of you so far, 70% in 50% of the time, 68% just changing as these figures come in, liking that. We've got a number of you who are feeling creative all of the time, 3 rarely. So let's, use what we've learned today to try and push that, that honest 8% there to feel in that creative space. And for those of you who feel creative, 50% of the time at least, is trying to work out how we act on that creativity.
Yeah, for sure. But that's a strong poll, isn't it? I mean, to go 73%. Yeah, that's good.
So you can look at that either way. You could say that half the time they don't feel creative, or you could say that half the time you do. It depends on your outlook.
Sure.
And the key thing, I'm in that 50% range. I'm probably feel creative just over 50% of the time. So I'm probably in the other bracket. The key thing here is making sure that you understand that your creativity will change. You will not feel creative all of the time. So the key is that when you don't feel creative, you understand why that is and you accept it, or you do something about it, which is what we've been talking about, changing music, changing the environment you work in, doing something differently just to break the routine and to break the monotony.
Have you ever sort of walked away from a job because of the constraints put by the client on the creativity, or would you always try and work around it?
Okay, if I book the job, I have to do it, and I have to fulfill, and I have to make it happen. If It depends if it's paying well enough. That's the honest truth. If a job's not creative but it's paying me well, I take it.
Right.
If there's no creativity in it and I'm not getting paid very much, I've got nothing to gain.
Sure.
So I must either fulfill my goals creatively or financially, ideally with both. If none of those are met, then I don't go for it.
Sure.
So I have to be able to get something out of it or something from it. So that's something that's really important to me.
A lot of people in fashion and often go back through history to get motivated or to get creative about things that people have done, or to be inspired by things from the past 100 years ago, 150 years ago, to look at art. Is that something that you've done?
Yes. All right. So I found an image on screen, just as you were mentioning, going back in time. The image on screen is kind of loosely connected with that, right? So I must have subconsciously taken in the copula. What is it? It's a theatre show, a musical, which is where the puppet turns the puppet into a real life character.
Yeah.
Pinocchio, and then I also watched a lot of period dramas. So that has probably fed into my subconscious mind, and as a result, it has affected the image that you see on the screen.
Yep.
So I watch different types of films. I'm a Downton Abbey fan, shameful, and loads of other kind of
War and Peace.
Yes, I'm watching War and Peace. So I hope that ends up being good. I'm loving it because I like seeing the subtlety of light. I like looking at how they work with color. I look how they make sure that the color palette is restricted. And then I try and execute on that. So definitely, the key thing is feed yourself visually as well. I went to one consultant because I paid for a consultant to look at my work and to critique my work because I was in a creative rut. So I needed someone I respected to kind of go, actually, Simeon, you're freaking rubbish, and this is what you need to do about it, right? Because sometimes we can be in an environment where everyone says, yes, I love it, yes, I love it, this is awesome, this is great, and I needed someone who could actually challenge me. So I went to Zoe Winshaw. Zoe Winshaw looked at my work and says, Simeon, your work, having worked a lot with Asian clientele, is far too, the lighting is too obvious. Like this shot, I love it. This is like, I'm loving this feel. So then that created a creative challenge where I needed to execute on a different vibe. So the lighting here is more subtle. So I'm working with constant light, but then maybe if I was working with video light here, I'll be working with a big, either a big fill, shooting through diffusion panels, for example, in order to make something happen there. So I think that is key. I'm going to give you all a final kind of tip, a couple of tips. One, if you have an area of interest, take what you love and mix it up. Combine the two together. So if you look on your screens now, you will see some things and interests that you may find that you have. Take that and work out how you can mix it up. So I did a car project because I was into cars. If you're into fashion, could you do something and really study the fashion side of things so that you can blend the two together? If you're involved in loved food, could you take that subject and merge it so that you are working with two things, two loves, the love of filming and creativity, but then also the love of another subject. Blend and merge them together. And then this next one is key, mind map. So when I'm in Covent Garden or an environment, changing things up, changing the scenario where I brainstorm, on screen at the moment, you will see an app that I use, which is called Simple Mind. Simple Mind. And I will take a subject and as an exercise, even if I don't have a real subject, I will do what you see on screen now. and I will take a subject and I will develop it. So I have John, and John in this scenario with the scene of the breakup is the protagonist, the main character. Then how does he break up? So I have a box that says break up by, and the options are letter, text, telephone, sticker, left on like a notice board, or face to face. I've then gone with letter and I've expanded that, and off letter has come different attempts at writing a letter. So another visual option for me in terms of storytelling.
Yeah.
How do I show that? Well, I crumpling the paper up and chucking it in the bin. And then I started to think about what I could use as a shot, how I could record that shot. I put a Ligria Mini inside the bin, small camera, wide angle, pointing upwards. But then I would go off to another area in this subject matter that I'm kind of building up the creativity and developing the story. And I would start to think, what props do I need? So if you see on the screen there, you see the branch that's green. The props I might need there is a chair, paper, pen, water, bin, tissues. Now, this is a brainstorm. I'm throwing things in, and I do this by myself. I also do this as a team, so I can get other people involved in this creative process. I'll show you another one of these now. So the video that I did with the England hurdler, we sat down and I quickly worked out, using this technique, ways that we could develop creatively, which then inform the camera I would use, which then inform the lenses that I would use, the support technology that we would use in order to create this particular visual story. So the key is to get your ideas on paper, even if you're not going to execute at that particular point in time. So some of these ideas and these brainstorms and some of the sketches that you've seen, I store them. I save them on my computer, and I save them, I leave them in my sketchbook so that when I'm creatively low, I pluck something out and we make it happen. Or when I have time. Because how many of you, the moment you feel creative is not when you are in a position to execute? In fact, I'm going to throw this question out there, right? Type the number 1 if this is you. You feel creative, but you're not in a position to execute because it's the wrong flipping time. Okay. We got,
Yes.
yeah, oh my goodness, right. Tim, Peter, Dan, Stefan, Emma, Raphael, Edward, Michael, Azar, Matt.
Yes.
Okay, Felix. Look how many of us are in this situation, because maybe our ideas come in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Or it's a time of year when we can't do something, or we are working in the middle of a project that's not going to be over for another month and we're neck deep in backlog or edit. So make sure you make a note of the idea or the concept, or it could be something to do with a music soundtrack. If you're using something like Music Bed and you hear a piece of music, but it's not what you need right now, save it in the favorites bin. If you see a video that you really like online, save it and bookmark it. For when you're in a position to execute, so that when you have a period of time when you can make it happen, you go through and you go, right, something, this is the idea here that we want to go with, and here are some visual things that I've really liked the look of over the course of the past month or two.
Brilliant. And would you say, in terms of turning it from purely creative to a business, which we're all in, to some degree, would you agree that being more creative has increased your clients, increased your business?
Yes. People buy what they see, and we call ourselves visual storytellers. We pride ourselves on a level of creativity, and the clients that we've got come to us and say, hey, as a storyteller, how would you do this? And that's what I want. We did it massively with weddings. We're doing it with corporate, but we need to articulate that more. So at the moment, the thing I'm working on in 2016 is making sure that we have portfolio that we can show. Look, I'm in a situation talking to you all as an audience, and we're sharing together. So really, it's not an audience. It's just one big conversation.
Sure.
I'm in the same position. I have exactly the same challenges, and my goal is to take more of my own advice, so that we can together we can make this happen.
Sure, that's fabulous. Well, we're running out of time, so unfortunately for me anyway, I've been enjoying it so much, we're going to have to call it a day. Thanks very much, Simeon. That was absolutely brilliant. We've learned a lot more. I'm sure the listeners have too.
Thank you. Thanks. And thank you everybody as well. Really appreciate that. Thanks, Stefan, Emma, Colin, people kind of getting involved with that. Really appreciate those comments. Thank you, Brian, Phil, Felix, Mike, Peter, Guy, Tim as well. Really appreciate that. You can find me on Twitter as well. So there's a kind of a Twitter handle up there. Please make sure you contact Visual Impact if you enjoyed the session, or Canon, myself. I'd love to keep the conversation going on Instagram and Periscope and all of those lovely ways that we love to interact with people. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and just a quick reminder that if you go onto our events page, we have quite a lot of events where you can get your hands on the product as well. So if that's what you'd rather do rather than a webinar, then come along. Our website is www.visuals.co.uk/events.
Cool. We're going to leave it open. I'm loving these comments. Really appreciate it. Take care, people. Hope you have a really good day. Yes, absolutely. Thanks to Visual Impact, and thank you very much to Canon for getting me here as well. Really appreciate that. Have yourselves a great day. Enjoy.